Hello, everybody. So tonight I wanted to talk a bit about a few different things. So I was in my therapy session today and I was speaking a lot about making connections with what took place at my parents' house last summer and how somebody could be a victim and they can choose to then become an abuser. So it all comes down to choices and the choice that you make. So I've spoken a lot about different circumstances that has taken place in my life over time. So due to generational trauma, I have experienced a lot of different types of trauma. When I was born, that trauma wasn't even mine. So I was already taking on other people's trauma. So I'm the youngest of four. Before I was even a thought, there was trauma. You know, now I'm in my mother's womb. There's trauma. I'm born now. There's trauma. Then that trauma just became mine. Then I started making memories and they became traumatic memories. And that's what has stuck with me. And that was kind of the foundation of my trauma. Now, I'm the youngest of four. My siblings have their own trauma. My parents have their own trauma. Their parents have their own trauma. And generational trauma, that's how it works. So I made a video with a bunch of matches, and as soon as you move one match, that does not continue the fire. So these matches will go on, they're lit, you move one match, those ones are no longer lit. And that is the concept behind a cycle breaker. So it's truly a very beautiful concept. It's very hard. It's very challenging, but it is so worth it because, again, in my family, we all have our own different forms of trauma. We all have our own perspectives of what we experienced. So we might have lived in the same house together, but we all experienced different things because we're our own different people. So my parents were the adults and me and my siblings were the children. So we were innocent children that were living in this home with the two parents who were adults. So again, even though my parents underwent their own trauma, they were once kids. They now grew to become adults who make their own choices. So my mother has her trauma, my father has his trauma, they marry, and therefore the siblings, the children, take on their trauma, and because they had unresolved trauma, we're taking on their trauma, and our trauma is being formed. So now I'm an adult, my siblings are adults, and we make the choices of, do we continue this generational trauma? Do we take our trauma, because me and all of my siblings have children, put that trauma on our children now? So I've said it before, my brother was the first cycle breaker in the family. And when I think back on it, I will be 30 in about 3 weeks. I'm very young, okay? I'm 29, I'm gonna be 30. That is so young. When everything happened to my brother, he was 23. That is so young. I was literally thinking about this in my therapy. Like, 23 is so young. And the decisions that he had to make at 23, what he had to experience even before 23. But at 23, making that decision, like, I am not doing this anymore. I'm not a part of this anymore. And he left. That is so brave. That is so courageous. And that is beautiful. And that is inspiring. So he chose to not have his trauma affect his children. Now I'm 29. Last summer, I was 28. I go to my parents' home. I had already known that there was going to be abuse, because when you went into my family and you connected with my family, there was always going to be some form of abuse. Usually it was verbal, emotional, and mental. When emotions were not regulated, there was always dysregulated emotions in the home. But when emotions were dysregulated, that's when physical abuse would come into play. There was even sexual harassment and forms of child sexual abuse that happened within my home growing up. So, and those things would happen when it was chaotic emotional dysregulation, because there was always emotional dysregulation in my family. Anyways, so that weekend, I remember becoming very obsessed with wanting to celebrate my family. It was my sister and my brother-in-law's wedding anniversary. It was my brother's birthday. Meanwhile, my brother was left at 23. And so last summer, it had been like almost 9 years without my brother in our lives. And that was always a touchy subject with my parents and my siblings, my sisters, because nobody could sit with the reason why he left. Nobody could sit and comprehend what happened for him to leave. And that's what happened. He left. He made that decision to leave, which again is very courageous and brave of a 23-year-old man. So no, my parents, my sisters, myself could not sit with the reason why he left. So his birthday was always like everybody was in mourning. You know, you would ask my father and he'd be like, oh, my son died. And it's like, no, he didn't. It's not my story to tell, but there's a reason why my brother left at the age of 23. There was abuse. So instead of my father owning that and saying that, he in turn would say, oh, my son died. And it's like, no, he didn't. So you could never bring up my brother around my father, especially. You'd have to like wait until my father brought up my brother. And then once he brought up my brother, it was like you had to be really careful with what you said, because you almost just had to listen to whatever he had to say. And it was more of a rant. Like, I gave him everything and blah, 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 like a bunch of just nonsense, not even thinking about the perspective and what actually happened to my brother. So anyway, It was my brother's birthday. It was my sister and my brother-in-law's anniversary, and my niece had just had her birthday the week prior, and I wasn't able to celebrate with them. So I was obsessed with, like, we need a family time, like, we need family together. And so I planned this whole birthday party at my parents' pool, because that was what always became a thing, was like, oh, it's my parents' pool, it's summer, like, we're all gonna pretend to be this happy family and invite people over and have a party. That's what summers at my parents' house is always like. So I'm planning this birthday party for my niece and celebration of my sister and my brother-in-law's wedding anniversary. And I really wanted to be together because it was my brother's birthday too. So I'm like, we all have to be together. So whatever, the day before, so this was like a Saturday, the day before my mother assaulted me, me and my kids go to that house and go to my parents' home. It's like so hard to even say my parents sometimes, because it's like I feel so disconnected from them. Like that's why sometimes I'll say my mom, my dad, and other times I'll say my father and my mother. Especially when they would be so abusive. Like, I wouldn't even see them as family. I would see them as a threat. So that's why sometimes you'll hear me say and call them like different names. So anyway, it was a Saturday. It wasn't the day of the party, but people were there at the house. And my dad was having pool cleaners come to like fix, I think, the diving board, because I was obese and I literally broke the diving board like a week prior, because I mean, it was old, but I was obese. So I definitely contributed to breaking that diving board. So my dad had like pool cleaner people and like diving board people come to their house to fix the diving board. Anyway, my father was in the pool. I was not. My family and the family friends that were there were helping with my 3 kids. And I was sitting down. And my father's in the pool and he's like, D'Angela, go get the vacuum. Can you go get the vacuum? He's like, I'm going to need you to do me a favor. You're not in the pool. I'm in the pool. And you need to go get the vacuum. And I'm just like, okay. I don't know how this like became my job, but I was just like, whatever. Like, I'm at their house, you know, they're helping me with my kids. Like, I'll just go get the vacuum. It's not a big deal. So whatever. I get up and I go try to go find the vacuum. So it was back at they have like a really small house, and then they have like a new house being built with the pool. So it was like a walking distance to go get the vacuum. But my dad did say, do not tell your mother that they're here. Do not tell your mother, because they have their own issues. My parents, they've always had their own issues. And it was like, how did it go from me going to go get the vacuum to now go keep a secret and go not tell your mother that the pool cleaners people are here? I don't know. He didn't want her giving them orders or something. He wanted control. He wanted to tell them orders. So I don't know. Somehow now I'm involved in this secret when I was supposed to just go get the vacuum. So anyway, I go down to the house and I'm like, hey mom, like, can I have the vacuum? And she's like, why do you need the vacuum? And I was like, well, Dad just asked me to get the vacuum. So I'm uncomfortable because I'm like, okay, I'm like lying now, or withholding information, as my family would say. So I'm like, all right, can I have the vacuum? And she's like, yeah, whatever. Like, here's the vacuum. And I was like, okay. And I was like so happy because I'm like, I didn't have to answer questions. Like, I did exactly as I was told. I got the vacuum and I didn't tell mom. So I go up to the pool. I give them the vacuum. I'm like, here's the vacuum. My father loses it on me because apparently the vacuum comes with like a separate battery pack, and it didn't have the battery pack. Maybe it was being charged. I don't know. I don't live there. I don't know about their vacuum. Like, I was just told to go get a vacuum. So my father loses it on me, and he's like, you are cursing me. I mean, there are like so many people. There are family friends there. There are other kids there. There are people there. The pool cleaners, like my kids, and he just loses it on me. And it's like, are you seriously that dumb? Like, you are every curse word you could think of, like just flipping out on me. And he's in the pool. He's like, I told you to go, why would you get a vacuum that doesn't have a battery? And I was like, I don't know why. You told me to go get the vacuum. I was like under pressure because I did so whatever. He's flipping out on me, and I'm like, can you not talk to me like that? And he's like, don't talk, this is my house. Don't, because I was talking back. So I'm just like, okay. He's like, go back in the house and go get the vacuum. And do not tell your mother. I'm like, okay. So now I'm like, great. I made it scot-free without her finding out about the vacuum. And now I have to like go back and ask for the battery. And now there's an opportunity for her to be like, why does he need the vacuum? So I go back to the house and I'm like, hey, Mom, is there like a battery that goes to the vacuum? Because I guess there's no battery and Dad needs the bat. She's like, well, why does he need the battery? Like, why does he need the vacuum in the first place? I'm like, I don't know. He told me not to tell you, but the pool people are here and they need the vacuum to clean out the area of where the diving board was because there's like gross stuff in it. And she's like, oh, the pool cleaners are here? Why didn't he tell me? I'm like, I don't know. So now I'm like, great, I betrayed my father, and now it's going to be this whole thing and whatever. I got the battery. So I come back up to the pool and I have the battery, and now my mom's behind me. And my dad's like, are you kidding me? Like, why did you get your mother? And I'm like, well, I got you the battery. Like, take the battery. So, when I was being cursed at and screamed at, like, everybody at the pool, family, friends, like, they were all like, nobody knew what to do. They were all just like, but somehow I was blamed. Somehow it was like, how dare I speak back to my father? Like, this is his house. They're helping me with my kids, and how dare I say he can't talk to me like that? Like, so nobody stuck up for me. I replay that in my mind, like, a lot. Because I'm like, what would that have played out like if I had my therapist there, or if I had people from my support group there? Trauma-informed people, like, how would that have played out if I actually had people in my corner there? Because everybody that was there was in my parents' corner, because they're like, well, they're being nice and they're letting us come to the pool, and, we don't say anything. This isn't our house. This is their business. This is their family. But my family would get so brave that they would abuse in front of others, and others would just like be like, yeah, whatever, like, that's them. And it was just so interesting to see. So anyway, I get the battery. Now my mother's up there. Now I'm in trouble, and I'm just like, ugh. I was so triggered. I was like, okay, I can't deal with this. My oldest is playing in the pool. He's having fun. My younger two, people are holding them, people are helping me. I didn't get a break. So I would also go there because I was like, well, at least they help me. Like, I would mentally prepare myself and be like, I know they're going to be abusive, but at least they'll help me. At least they'll hold my babies. At least I can go swim in a pool. Like, at least, because I didn't have self-care. I didn't have any practices of like doing anything beneficial to my self-care or my self-love or anything like that. So I was like, this is something where I know they'll help me. So I'll just go there. And at the end of the day, like, I loved my family. So I was like, and we can make memories. Like, so anyway, now I'm like wicked triggered with my PTSD, and I'm just like, I can't be here. Like, I don't want to be here anymore. I want to go home to my house. Like, I don't want to be here anymore. And so my mother's up there, she's talking with the pool cleaners now, you know, they're aggravated, but then somehow my dad ends up being like, hi honey, to like my mom, and now all of a sudden they're better, because that was just like what happened. They would like hate each other and then love each other in like the same second. But I'm like, can't even look at him, because with my PTSD, I was seeing my father as my children's father. Like, I literally saw him as my children's father. And I was like, I can't even look at that guy. Like, he is a threat. Like, I don't want anything to do with that man. Like, that's literally how I would even talk about my father, because I'm like, I can't, no. So I went inside the new house that wasn't built, and I'm just with my babies. And now my mother's like, honey, are you all right? I'm like, no. Like, I can't stand dad. Like, I'm not, he just thinks he can, and I'm like pouring my heart out to my mother. And my mother is fully my mother in this moment. Like, she is like, honey, I know that he can be the way that he can be. Like, honey, it is not right how he treats you and how he treats me and how he treats people. It is not okay. And she's like, but we're at the pool. We're making memories. Like, it's okay, honey. Like, and I was like, no, I see him as my children's father. Like, that's how I see him right now. Like, I can't. And she's like, honey, I know. Like, it's hard, but that's not him. That's your father. And I was like, he's worse than my children's father. Like, I don't want anything. Like, I am not all right. Like, I need to get away from them. So I think at one point I was like breastfeeding my babies. I'm with my mother in the new house. And at one point my father's like, is she all right? And, you know, my mother's like still a victim. So she's like, I don't know. He was just in the honeymoon stage with me. You know, that's what my mother's probably thinking. I don't want to get him mad and tell him that now she's mad at him. And I don't want to tell him that it's his fault. So she's like, it's fine. Like, she has a headache. And I'm like, this is how it is in my family. It's like, we don't address anything. Like, we're not going to talk about how my father was acting. We're just going to, now D'Angela is making a scene. When I'm a human being and I have emotions. And so anyway, at one point my father's like, are you going to eat? I'm going to make food. And I'm like, I don't even want to talk to you. Like, I don't even want to look at you. So whatever, I end up having this like heart-to-heart conversation with my mother where I felt all the love. And I felt like, wow, my mother really loves me and she really cares about me. And she gets it. And I ended up being like, Mom, why do you not leave Dad? Like, why? Like, by you staying, you're teaching me to stay. Why do you think I stayed with my children's father for so long? Like, I had this heart-to-heart with my mother, explaining to her, like, all of my feelings and how this is what abuse is, because I was being taught I was already in therapy. I had just started karate and self-defense. I was learning I was educating myself on like what this was. And they didn't like it. Like, my oldest sister didn't like it. Like, they didn't like that I was saying words like, I need better boundaries. Like, they were triggered by that, because that would mean that they would not get the version of me that they can control. So they were like, you're being brainwashed into thinking that we're the problem. Like, your children's father is the problem. I'm like, yeah, but let's get down to the bottom of why I stayed with my children's father for so long. Like, we're not going to talk about that. Like, you guys don't think, like, why is my brother not here? Are we going to talk about that? Like, why does Dad think he can call me an idiot because I didn't get a battery. Like, are we going to talk about that? No, we're not going to talk about that. Like, we don't talk about that stuff. So, so I was frustrated, but I felt loved talking to my mother that day, because I was like, she gets me. Like, she gets it, but she won't leave him. And I don't know why she won't leave him, because part of her wants to. Part of her is like, I can't be treated like this anymore. Like, it's wrong what he does to me. And I'm like, yeah, it is wrong. Like, there were times in my life as a kid where, like, my older two sisters were trying to tell my parents that they needed to, like, leave each other. And, you know, it's like, it's not healthy, but yet they love each other and they hate each other, but they love each other, and it's a cycle of abuse. So anyway, I had a heart-to-heart with my mother that day. My father ended up leaving. All of the family friends, they ended up leaving too. My father was like, I got to get out of this. She's still here at me. She's still here at my house, so I got to get away from her. So he took his sports car and he left, and it was just like me and my mother. And we're crying because it was my brother's birthday. Like, I was like, I miss my brother. Like, I just, you know, there's a reason why my brother left. Like, this is only a glimpse of what my father can do. And, you know, you get it because he does it to you too. So I'm just confused as to, like, why we're here again in this situation. But so, I mean, I had a great day with my mother, honestly, even though it was, like, intense and I was frustrated with her because I'm like, why don't you just leave him, you know? But, you know, we ended up, she had this, like, tree where she would make rocks. And I remember I made a rock for my brother to put it under the tree, and I'm just like, it was just, we were all, like, I mean, for me at least, I'm like, I just miss my brother. And nobody addresses the fact that there's a reason why my brother is not, like, nobody wants to address that. So anyway, now it's the next day, and I planned this whole birthday party, and I'm like, now is the day of the birthday party, and what do I do? Like, it's the birthday party now, so I can't not go. I'm the one who made a huge deal about this birthday party, so I obviously still have to go. But I'm like, I don't want to talk to my dad. Like, I want nothing to do with my dad, but I'm still going to go because I hosted this huge party or whatever. So now it's the party. I show up at the house, and I was just like, whatever, D'Angela, just, like, it's his house, and just say hello. So I convinced myself to just be like, hi, Dad. And he was like, hi, honey. And I'm like, yeah, we're not going to talk about what happened yesterday. We're just going to, like, pretend like nothing happened. And before we know it, I'm just like, okay, my dad loves me. Like, I'm being accepted again. And so I end up having conversations with him very subtly, but having conversations with him again. And he's like, oh, do you want me to cook you a burger? And I'm like, sure, Dad. Like, I don't know how that happened. But that's, like, what abusers do, is, like, they reel you back in. So now somehow I'm like, guess I'm talking to my dad again. I mean, it was a great day. It was a great birthday party. You know, my niece was happy. I bought her a cake. We sang happy birthday. Everything was great. We made memories, you know. But now everybody's leaving. The family friends are leaving. All the guests are leaving. And it's just me, my 3 kids, my sister, her 4 kids, her husband, and my parents. And I always had an issue with I had to unlearn a lot of things that I was taught. And I definitely shouldn't have stayed there as long as I did. I definitely needed to set up boundaries. You know, I definitely needed more self-care and self-love. My nephew was getting older, and he wanted to, you know, he knew how to throw, like, footballs and stuff, and that reminded me of my brother. It was the day after my brother's birthday now, so I'm still thinking of my brother. And I'm like, oh, you know, my brother taught me how to throw a football. Like, you know, now my nephew's older, now, so we can throw a football together. And I'm just like, my family's helping me with my kids. I can get a break. I can jump in the pool. Like, I can, you know, throw a football with my nephew now. And so whatever, like, we're throwing a football. My mom was, like, helping my oldest understand pedals on a bike. And so I definitely should have left, but you know, I was enjoying having help, honestly, and being able to throw football with my nephew. So I'm doing those things, and then at one point my family's like, okay, it's like 7:00 at night now, like you gotta get the kids home. And I'm like, yeah, okay, all right, but I really just like wanted to swim, so I'm like, all right, okay, I'm really gonna go now. So I get dressed, my 5-year-old's like riding the bike still, and I'm sitting by the deep end in a chair next to my dad now, trying to like start conversation. My 5-year-old's getting really, he was 4 at the time, but he was getting really close to the deep end, like riding the bike, getting close to the deep end. And I think at one point my dad was like, hey, you gotta move the bike, like don't ride near the deep end. And you know, he's 4. So, and I was like in adult conversation trying to talk to my dad, and I was like enjoying a conversation, or trying to at least. And my son ends up riding the bike into the deep end. And my father was like, are you kidding me? Exactly what I predicted was going to happen. You're dumb and he's dumber. And I was just like, that's it. I'm done. I got to get out of this place. Like, I'm done. And so that is what got me, where I was like, nope, I am not dealing with these people anymore. And that's what it was. They were these people again. Like, they're a threat again. I'm like, I got to get out of this. What is wrong with me? Why do I keep staying? Like, why did I come here? Like, so my trauma response is flight. I'm like, I got to get out of this place. I got to get away from these people. So immediately, I think obviously I did see my son go into the deep end, but my trauma response was like, I saw my mother and my sister go to my son. So I'm like, okay, he's all right. They're helping him. I got to get my clothes, my kids' clothes, and I got to get my babies, and I got to get out of here. So I'm getting all of my clothes, my kids' clothes, and I'm like, I got to get, I don't even know what was coming out of my mouth. It was just like, I got to get out of here. Like, I can't stand him. He is so rude. Like, I'm not dealing with this anymore. And, so yeah, I'm getting everything. I'm bent down. I'm trying to get the clothes. My mother and my sister are like, you're not even paying attention. Your son, I'm like, no, I know he drove into the pool. I knew you were helping him, but I got to get out of here. Like, I cannot stand. I talked to my 5-year-old. I'm like, are you okay? And he's like, I'm okay. And, you know, of course, a part of me wished I could just go right to my son in that moment. But in that moment, I was in flight. Like, I was like, I got to get away from these people. So, and I can't go back in time and immediately run to my son right away. My response was flight. So I'm getting my children's things. My mother's like still trying to help. She's like, well, they can wear this. Like, it's fine. Like, it's all right. Like, you know, he didn't mean it. I'm like, no, he did mean it. Like, this is the problem. Like, I got to get out of this. I got to get out of this house. I got to get away from you people. And I think at one point I even said that. I got to get away from you people. And so they're all like, you are so disrespectful. What is your problem? And I think I was like, my mother was trying to help dress my daughter. And I'm like, give me my daughter. Like, this is my daughter. Like, again, they're all threats to me. So, so I get my daughter, and my mother's like, you have issues. And I'm like, I don't even know what I said. I'm like, I have PTSD. Like, we know. But, like, I got to get out of here. So I'm bent down. I'm trying to get clothes. That's when my mother winds up and spanks me. Just winds up and spanks me. And I remember, like, bending up and being like, did you just spank me? And she was like, yeah. Like, so proud of herself. Like, you're acting like a child, so I need to. And she had just such anger, like, in her face. So for me, I'm like, they're all threats. I already saw them as threats, but now I'm like, wow, they're all threats. Like they are not my family. Like they are threats. They're abusers. All of them. Because even my sister was like chiming in and being like, you've been throwing a football at my son this whole time, not even paying attention to the fact that we're helping you with your kids and I'm like, I gotta get away from these people. Like I can't. So my mother spanks me. She's justifying spanking me. She like moves closer to me, and I don't know if it was like in an aggression or I don't know, but she moves closer to me like mad, and I push her. Like I literally was like, get away from me. And my family loved it. I gave them everything that they were looking for. They were like, it's you. You're the problem. My father tries to come at me. Like he is full force, like trying to get past my brother-in-law. My brother-in-law, thankfully, was like, do not go towards her. My kids are crying. My sister's kids are crying. If I could go back in time and not push my mother, I would. But you know what? That was my trauma response. I went from flight to fight. And if anything, I'm proud of myself because I used to freeze. Like here I am, someone who would almost allow my children's father to strangle me and suffocate me and kick me in the stomach. And I would just stand there as he was strangling me. And now I'm in karate and self-defense, and I'm being taught my mother spanked me. And she was coming towards me, and I pushed her. And there might have been like a minute or two before, like in that time frame of her spanking me and then me pushing her. And I remember pushing her, and I might have pushed her a second time and a third time. Like I was like, I saw her as my children's father then. And I'm like, now my sister's like, check yourself. Like everything's just, there's just so much happening. And I'm like, I remember taking my kids and having my kids like go in the new house. But my sister's kids are like bawling their eyes out. At one point, yeah, my 5-year-old, well 4 at the time, was crying. And I'm like, I gotta get out of this place. That's all. And so I'm getting everything, and they're all like, how dare you? And my father's like, how dare you put your hands on your mother? Like, it's all my fault. But nobody's gonna talk about the day before. Nobody's gonna talk about my mother spanking me. Nobody's gonna talk about that. It's just all my fault. It's all my fault. So yeah. I did. I got all my kids. I got all my belongings, and I put my kids in the car, and they're all screaming at me, this is how you're going to leave. This is how you're going to leave. This is what you're going to do. And I'm like, bye. Like, I got to get out of here. So I left, and yeah, that whole thing was turned on to me. That whole thing became my fault. That whole thing became D'Angela's the problem. That whole thing became, how dare you put your hands on your mother? That entire circumstance became me as the problem. And because I responded that way out of self-defense and in fight mode, I gave them the reaction that they wanted. I gave them exactly what they wanted. So if I was in a better place in my healing journey, I probably wouldn't have pushed my mother. But that's how I responded that day. And I gave my family exactly what they wanted. And still to this day, they tell the story so differently. They tell the story like I'm the problem. But anyway, with time, I think I might have apologized to my mother that night when I got home, because I called my cousin being like, what just happened? And again, my cousin at the time was like, Yeah, but like you were mad at your father and like your mother was just spanking you because, and I'm like, okay, you don't get it either. Like you don't, this is not my fault. Like I take responsibility for the part that I played, but you cannot put fault. At the end of the day, my mother is a victim too. So in that moment, she was probably so mad at my father too. She was probably so mad at herself that she's like, why do I stay with this man? Look at what he's doing to my children. That she took out her pain onto her daughter. So that's what I'm talking about victims can become abusers. Because in no way did I think that the conversation that I had with my mother the day before was going to turn into her physically assaulting me the next day. In no way did I think that was going to happen. But that's what happened. So I think that night I ended up calling my mother like on Google Duo and being like, I'm so sorry. And she's like, you know, your father did not want me to answer. He got up and like left the room that she was in. Like, why are you answering the phone? I could hear him in the background. And I was like, because I love you. And I love Dad. And I love my sister. And I love my other sister. And I love my brother. I miss my brother. Why are we like this? And they don't want it. My mother's like, well, because you were. She's like, I probably shouldn't have spanked you, but like you were the one that. And I'm like, okay, so none of this is, no, but I'm taking responsibility. I am so sorry that I put my hands on you. You are my mother. You gave me life. But you put your hands on me. Like, are we not going to address that? And she's like, well, I shouldn't have done that, but, and she's justifying it again, like, but the way you were speaking to us, like, we're your parents. And I'm like, he literally said that I'm dumb and my son's dumber. My 4-year-old son is dumber. And she's like, yeah, but you didn't respond to your son. Like, you didn't go to the pool and help him out of the water. I was like, I couldn't grasp. I saw you and my sister go to him. I saw that. Like, I saw that you guys were okay, like, that he was okay. And at one point, my sister was trying to say that, like, I took my kids and put them in the new house, and my youngest was on the floor, and I almost stepped on him. And I was like, I knew exactly where my son was. I knew he was on the floor. I'm not going to step on my son. Like, they make it into, like I knew what was happening. Although I was in a trauma response, like, I'm not going to hurt my children. So it's like, I don't know what they were trying to do by that. At one point, they even said my nephew was crying because he's like, do we have to take self-defense on Auntie Ange now because of what she did to Nana? And I'm just like, that's how you're going to tell the story to the 9-year-old? That I'm the threat and that it was okay for mom to spank me? And my sister's like, yeah, she had every right to spank you. You were not listening. You were not being respectful. This is their house. After everything they do for you. I'm like, she physically put her hands on me. Like, in no way did I want that. In no way was I like, yeah, mom, spank me. Like, what? Why are we putting hands on people? So I do end up apologizing to my mother. I try to like rekindle my relationship with my mother for like a couple of months. My father put me in silent treatment for like a couple months. I end up telling my therapist what happened because she, you know, I had a call with my therapist and she's like, how was your weekend? I'm like, well, this is what happened. So now my therapist is concerned because she's like, your mother is your main source of childcare. Like, if she's going to spank her 28-year-old daughter, we do not trust her with your children. And I had DCF in my life. And so my therapist mandated reporters, you know, DCF is told. DCF files a 51A on my mother. Now the whole thing's my fault. Why would you tell them? I'm like, am I supposed to lie to my therapist and not say what happened this weekend? Like, I'm very stressed out and I need to talk about what happened this weekend. They're like, well, did you say that you hit me? And I'm like, oh, I fully explained what happened. And they're like, well, you're the one. And I'm like, well, you're the one that spanked me. Like, so yeah, then the police were informed, and then the police pressed charges on my mother. And so that's how my mother was being charged with assault. But again, that was my fault. I tried to like set boundaries with my mother and say, you know, because I didn't want to be around her. I stayed around her for like a couple months. And this was all within like a time frame of between, because that happened in July and I got granted a harassment prevention order in like March or April. But I cut contact with my family in like November, December. Like I haven't spoken to my oldest sister since November. I haven't spoken to my other sister closest in age with me since like April. Or maybe even May. I think April of last year. So this all happened in a long time frame though. Like it wasn't right away that DCF was informed. I think it was like maybe a week before DCF was informed. Actually, no, I think DCF was informed like right away, but the police were informed like months later. And because I was setting boundaries with my mother, like I didn't talk to her in September. The last time I hung out with her was like August, but my birthday, so much happened on my birthday. That's like a whole nother story. But the last time I actually talked to her was like end of September, like the day after my birthday. I didn't want anything to do with her in like October, November, December. December was the last time I physically spoke to my parents, my mother and my father. My mother was like leaving Christmas presents on my doorstep after I cut contact. She was leaving like birthday presents on my doorstep after I cut, like for my son who was turning 5, on my doorstep. Even though I've blocked her and everything, like she just kept showing up to my neighborhood. And then I'm like, I would talk to my cousin and she'd say, well, she's your mother. Like, say thank you for the presents. And I was like, I really don't want to. I have her blocked. And she's like, well, unblock her and just say thank you. And I'm like, I don't want to do that. But I gave in to my cousin and I just was like, whatever. Yeah, I unblocked her and I said thank you and that's it. And I blocked her again. And she's like, that's the least you could do. She just wants to know you're safe. I'm like, okay. Like, people don't get it. They don't get it. So yeah, my mother just wouldn't stop. She kept like harassing me by email, finding other ways to contact me, posting, you know, things online. Like it just, and then she would not stop. I think she showed up in March, like twice in 1 week. Like she was getting bold. And I'm like, I can't. She's literally re-triggering me all over again. Like I can't deal with this anymore. And that's when I went to the courts and I'm like, I need a harassment prevention order against this woman. She's not leaving me alone now. And I said everything. I even wrote in the report that I physically defended myself back. I said she physically assaulted me. And, you know, I said everything. She's harassing me. She's stalking me. She won't stop. And they granted it. And, yeah. And it's like, you think I wanted to do that? Like, you think I really woke up one day being like, I really want to just get a harassment prevention order on my mother. I really want my mother to be charged with physically assaulting me. I really want these things. No. And do you think my brother woke up one day and was like, I want to get, you know, a restraining order on my dad? Like, I want to get, do you really think that that's like what goes through our minds? Because it's not. And I've heard so many things from other people since sharing my story being like, but they're your mother, they're your father. Like, how dare you? I've had to hear it from my grandparents when I went to visit them a couple weekends ago in New York. Like, you know, your mother's really crying about this and it's like, you know what? She's an adult and she's made the decisions that she's made. Yes, she's a victim. And she's had to undergo a lot in her life. But she is an adult now, and she has chosen to make these decisions. And she physically assaulted me. She stays with my father. My father is even a victim. I'm sure he's undergone a lot of trauma, but he's an adult now who makes decisions, who's chosen to become an abuser. A dangerous abuser, might I add. And again, what happened with my brother, that is not my story to tell. But you can Google it. Listening to my grandparents when I went to New York, they're like, "You're going to ruin their business." I'm like, you can literally Google my father's name. He's ruining his business. I'm allowed to come onto social media and share my story. I am not going to be quiet anymore. Not allowed. Not going to. I'm allowed to tell my story. Telling me to not tell my story, telling me to be quiet and think of my family's emotions in this, that shouldn't be allowed. But that's how society responds, is like, I've lost extended family over this, over me telling my story. Just being like, what are you doing? I can't believe you're doing this. And then I have some family that still follows me and watches, but they have their own thoughts about it. And I don't have the same relationship with some family anymore because they're like, why is she? You're a butterfly in a thorn bush. Embrace it and fly free. That's so sweet. That's really nice. I love that. I love butterflies, so that makes me happy. Yes, I'm flying free, guys. I'm so proud of myself. Like, I am so proud of myself. And before any of this happened that weekend, the weekend of my brother's birthday, my son was already telling me things like, Mom, your mom and your dad do this, and this to you and us, but we're still around them. And my children's father did this, and we do not have him in our lives. I'm confused. I was like, I'm confused too. Thank you so much for telling me that, because I've been a hypocrite this entire time. Thank you so much for telling me that. Mommy is so sorry that I have confused you. I was contributing to my children's trauma by staying around my family. And now I do not do that because I'm breaking the cycle, and I'm so proud of myself. Does my 5-year-old have questions? Does he wonder, why are we not around? Yes. And do I answer his questions? Yes. And does he understand the answers? Yes. And do I know that my family is telling my niece and nephews other stories? Yes. Am I okay with that? I'm okay with it as to the extent of what I can be okay with. One day they're going to grow up. And one day they're going to find my story. And they're going to have their own trauma and their own memories and their own perspective and their own perception. Maybe one day they'll become adults and want to speak to their Auntie Ange. And that's emotional. Because the children are innocent in all of this. The children are innocent in this. And that is what finally got me to realize that my children deserve better. And my sisters are still stuck in the cycle. And unfortunately, my sisters are contributing to their children's trauma, just like I am responsible for contributing to my children's trauma, but I'm not doing it anymore. But I am responsible for it. But I'm not doing it anymore. My sisters have to explain to their children any questions that they have with what they witness. And that's their job. So, I could keep talking all day. I feel better. This is my story, and I'm going to tell my story, and I'm going to keep talking. People can do what they want with my story, but this is my story. Thank you so much for listening. I'm so grateful for this platform and being able to speak out against abusers, whether they're my family or strangers or friends or thank you. I am smiling. Thank you for the reminder to smile. Thank you so much. I could listen to you all day. You have empowered so many people. Thank you so much. This is what I love, is the community. I've met some great people from sharing my story. And it really gives me so much sense of self-love and self-worth and self-care that I never had. And now I have it. And I'm so excited to turn 30. I really am. It's such a beautiful healing journey that I've been on. And now I will be 30 and it's beautiful. So, all right, guys, I'll head out because I do want to upload this to my YouTube and everything. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you. Until next time, guys.